Graf. Gräfin is a historical title of the German nobility, usually translated as count. Considered intermediate among noble ranks, the title is often treated as equivalent to the British earl. History. The comital title Graf is common to various European territories where German was or is the official vernacular tongue, e.g., Austria, Germany, Switzerland, Luxembourg, Liechtenstein, Alsace, the Baltic states and other Habsburg crown lands. Since August 1919, in Germany, Graf, like any other hereditary title, is treated as part of the legal surname rather than as an indication of nobility. In Austria its use, as with all hereditary titles and nobiliary particles, is banned by law, whereas in Switzerland the title is not acknowledged in law. In the monarchies of Belgium, Liechtenstein and Luxembourg, where German is one of the official languages, the title continues to be recognized, used and, occasionally, granted by the National Fons Honorum, the reigning monarch. For the medieval era, a Graf usually ruled a territory known as a Grafschaft. In the Holy Roman Empire, many imperial counts retained near sovereign authority in the lands until the Congress of Vienna subordinated them to larger, neighboring monarchs through the German mediatization process of 1815, preserving the precedence, allocating familial representation in local legislatures, some jurisdictional immunities and the prestigious privilege of Ebenbürtigkeit. In regions of Europe where nobles did not actually exercise Landeshoheit, or sovereignty over the populace, the Graf long retained specific feudal privileges over the land and in the villages in his county, such as rights to peasant service, to periodic fees for use of common infrastructure such as timber, mills, wells and pastures. These rights gradually eroded and were largely eliminated before or during the 19th century, leaving the Graf with few legal privileges beyond land ownership, although comital estates in German-speaking lands were often substantial. Nonetheless, various rulers in German-speaking lands granted the hereditary title of Graf to their subjects, particularly after the abolition of the Holy Roman Empire in 1806. Although lacking the prestige and powers of the former imperial counts, they remained legal members of the local nobility, entitled to whatever minor privileges were recognized at the ruler's court. The title, translated as count, was generally accepted and used in other countries by custom. Many continental counts in Germany and Austria were titled Graf without any additional qualification, except in the Kingdom of Prussia from the 19th century. The title of Graf was not restricted by primogeniture. It was inherited by all legitimate descendants in the male line of the original title holder, the males also inheriting an approximately equal share of the family's wealth and estates. Usually a hyphenated suffix indicated which of the familial lands a particular line of counts held, e.g. Castel-Rudenhausen. In the medieval Holy Roman Empire, some counts took or were granted unique variations of the Graflich title, often relating to a specific domain or jurisdiction of responsibility, e.g. Landgraf, Markgraf, Pfalzgraf, Burggraf, Wildgraf, Waldgraf, Altgraf, Raugraf, etc. Although as a title Graf ranked officially below those of Herzog and Fürst, the Holy Roman Emperor could and did recognize unique concessions of authority or rank to some of these nobles, raising them to the status of Gefürsteter Graf or princely count. But a Graflich title with such a prefix did not always signify a higher than comital rank of membership in the Hochadel. Only the more important of these titles, historically associated with degrees of sovereignty, remained in use by the 19th century, i.e., Markgraf and Landgraf. For a list of the titles of the rank of count etymologically related to Graf, see article Count. Etymology and origin. The word Graf is said to derive ultimately from the Greek verb Gräfin, but this may be fanciful. Paul the Deacon wrote in Latin California 790, the Count of the Bavarians that they call Gravia, who governed Bausanum and other strongholds. This may be read to make the term a Germanic one, but by then using Latin terms was quite common. Nobility titles containing the term Graf. Some are approximately of comital rank, some higher, some lower. The more important ones are treated in separate articles, a few minor, rarer ones only in sections below. Reichsgraf. A Reichsgraf was a nobleman whose title of count was conferred or confirmed by the Holy Roman Emperor. A meant imperial count, i.e. a count of the Holy Roman Empire. Since the feudal era, any count whose territory lay within the empire and was under the immediate jurisdiction of the emperor with a shared vote in the Reichstag came to be considered a member of the upper nobility in Germany, along with princes, dukes, electors, and the emperor himself. A count who was not a Reichsgraf was likely to possess only a mean fief. He was subject to an immediate prince of the empire, such as a duke or prince-elector. However, the Holy Roman Emperors also occasionally granted the title of Reichsgraf to subjects and foreigners who did not possess and were not granted immediate territories, or sometimes any territory at all. Such titles were purely honorific. In English, Reichsgraf is usually translated simply as count and is combined with a territorial suffix or a surname. Even after the abolition of the Holy Roman Empire in 1806, the Reichsgräfin retained precedence above other counts in Germany. Those who had been quasi-sovereign until German mediatization retained, until 1918, status and privileges pertaining to members of reigning dynasties. Notable Reichsgräfin included Kastel, Fugger, Henneberg, a title merged into the imperial dignity, Leiningen, Nassau-Weilburg since 26 September 1366, Pappenheim, Stolberg, Tyrol as a dominion of the Austrian crown. A complete list of Reichsgräfin with immediate territories as of 1792 can be found in the list of Reichstag participants. Margrave. A Markgraf. A Margrave was originally a military governor of the Carolingian Mark, a border province. In medieval times the borders of the Holy Roman Empire were especially vulnerable to foreign attack, so the hereditary count of these marches of the realm was sometimes granted greater authority than other vassals to ensure security. They bore the title Margrave until the few who survived as sovereigns assumed higher titles when the empire was abolished in 1806. Examples: Margrave of Baden, Margrave of Brandenburg Bayreuth. Since the abolition of the German Empire at the end of World War I, the heirs of some of its former monarchies have resumed use of Margrave as a title of pretense, e.g. Maria Emanuel, Margrave of Meissen, and Maximilian, Margrave of Baden. Landgrave. A Landgraf. A Landgrave was a nobleman of comital rank in feudal Germany whose jurisdiction stretched over a territory larger than usually held by a count within the Holy Roman Empire. The status of a Landgrave was elevated, usually being associated with suzerains who were subject to the Holy Roman Emperor but exercised sovereign authority within the lands and independence greater than the prerogatives to which a simple Graf was entitled. But the title itself implied no specific legal privileges. Landgraf occasionally continued in use as the subsidiary title of such minor royalty as the Elector of Hesse or the Grand Duke of Saxe-Weimar, who functioned as the Landgrave of Thuringia in the first decade of the 20th century. The jurisdiction of a Landgrave was a Landgrafschaft, a Landgraviate, and the wife of a Landgrave was a Landgraf and a Landgravine. Examples: Landgrave of Thuringia, Landgrave of Hesse, Landgrave of Leuchtenberg, Landgrave of Fürstenberg-Vitra. The title is now borne by the hereditary heirs to the deposed monarchs of Hesse, who lost the throne in 1918. Gefürsteter Graf. A Gefürsteter Graf is a Reichsgraf who was recognized by the Holy Roman Emperor as bearing the higher rank or exercising the more extensive authority of an imperial prince. While nominally retaining only a comital title, he was accorded princely rank and, usually, arms by the emperor. Burgrave, Viscount. A burggraf, or burgrave, was a 12th and 13th century military and civil judicial governor of a castle of the town it dominated and of its immediate surrounding countryside. His jurisdiction was a burggrafschaft, burgraviate. Over time the office and domain to which it was attached tended to become hereditary by imperial grant or retention over generations by members of the same family. Examples: Burgrave of Nuremberg, Burgrave of Donauschlobitten. Initially burgrave suggested a similar function and history as other titles rendered in German by Vicegraf, in Dutch as burggraf, or in English as viscount, the deputy of a count charged with exercising the count's prerogatives in overseeing one or more of the count's strongholds or fiefs. As the burgrave dwelt usually in a castle or fortified town, some became hereditary and by the modern era obtained rank just below a count, though above a friar who might hold a fief as vassal of the original count. Rhinegrave, Wildgrave, Raugrave, Altgrave. Unlike the other comital titles, Rhinegrave, Wildgrave, Raugrave, and Altgrave are not generic titles. Rather, each is linked to a specific countship, whose unique title emerged during the course of its history. These unusually named countships were equivalent in rank to other counts of the empire who were of Hochadel status, being entitled to a shared seat and vote in the imperial diet and possessing imperial immediacy, most of which would be mediatized upon dissolution of the empire in 1806. Rhinegrave was the title of the Count of the Rheingau, a county located between Wiesbaden and Lorch on the right bank of the Rhine. The castle was known as the Rheingrafenstein Castle, after the Rhinegraves inherited the Wildgraviate and parts of the Countship of Salm. They called themselves Wild and Rhinegraves of Salm. When the Nafagau split into two parts in 1113, the counts of the two parts, belonging to the House of Salm, called themselves Wildgraves and Raugraves, respectively. They were named after the geographic properties of the territories, Wildgrave after walled, and Raugrave after the rough terrain. The first Raugrave was Count Emichi. The dynasty died out in the 18th century. Charles I Louis elected Palatine purchased the estates, and after 1667 accorded the wife and children of his arguably bigamous second marriage to Baroness Marie-Louise von Degenfeld. The title of Raugravine, Raugrave, Altgrave was a title used by the counts of Lower Salm to distinguish themselves from the Wild and Rhinegraves of Upper Salm, since Lower Salm was the senior branch of the family. In Sweden, the corresponding titles in Sweden are Greve and Gräfin would commonly be used in the third person in direct address as a mark of courtesy, as in Gräfin. Modern usage in German surnames. German nobility, although not abolished, lost recognition as a legal class in Germany in 1919 under the Weimar Constitution, Article 109. Former hereditary noble titles legally simply transformed into dependent parts of the legal surname. As dependent parts of the surnames, they are ignored in alphabetical sorting of names, as is the eventual nobiliary particle, such as von Azu, and might not be used by those bearing them. The distinguishing main surname is the name following the Graf, or Gräfin, and the eventual nobiliary particle. Today, having lost the legal status, these terms are often not translated, unlike before 1919. The titles do, however, retain prestige in some circles of society. Other uses. The suffix Graf occurs in various office titles which did not attain nobiliary status but were either held as a sinecure by noblemen or courtiers, or functional officials such as the Graf.